Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. I know what you're thinking. I watched your the best class in D&D guide, and I watched your last build video, and all you talk about is clerics. You love clerics, and clerics are dumb, and you're a dumb dummy for liking them. So, fine. We'll do something different today, okay? I'm gonna do druid, which I mentioned in my other video is my other class I play a lot of, and it was the first class I played back in Pathfinder. Druid is very different in 5th edition than it was in Pathfinder, so I'm not as big of a fan of it as I once was. We're going to do a concept for a druid, although you could very easily convert this concept into maybe like an illusion or divination wizard if you wanted to. I've been doing deities in the last two videos, and we are going to use a deity for inspiration this time as well. But we're going to focus more on the race, right? So because there isn't much information on this deity, but there's a lot more written about this race. And I think we could have a good time with it regardless. And it's the same mindset of you pick something, either a deity or in this case, a race, and then you explore it and then you kind of develop a character from it. Now, this is a character idea that I've played in the past that I'm kind of re-remembering and fleshing out live because I played this character maybe 4 years ago. I haven't played this character in quite a long time. The initial kind of inspiration of this was Willow, the movie Willow, the George Lucas film with is it Warwick Davis was the main character. If you haven't seen the movie, it's pretty good if you like The Princess Bride and you like those kind of like campier 80s fantasy movies. It's one of those. If you're not really into that kind of stuff, then you won't like it. But yeah. So the character's name is Willow because I am very original, and it's a forest gnome. So why forest gnome? Well, got my handy dandy player's handbook right here, and I'm gonna open it up to the um, forest gnome section, and it says, as a forest gnome, you have a natural knack for illusions and inherent quickness and stealth. In the worlds of D&D, forest gnomes are rare and secretive. They gather in hidden communities in sylvan forests using illusions and trickery to conceal themselves from threats or to mask their escape should they be detected. Forest gnomes tend to be friendly with other good-spirited woodland folk, and they regard elves and good fae as their most important allies. These gnomes also befriend small forest animals and rely on them for information about threats that might prowl their lands. Now, the reason I like to use these guys as druids is because it gives you access to Minor Illusion. Minor Illusion is a fantastic, fun spell. You can use it in combat rather effectively to create, concealment and other things. But just in role playing, I find it has a lot of use. You can use it very well to much fun. Additionally, you can speak with animals, which I know that the animals necessarily can only communicate simple ideas. I think it's really funny. I love giving my DM those like situations, and often we have a really good back and forth because they know that I'm not going to be serious with it. It's going to be a joke, and I think it's a great way to inject humor into a group. Set your DM up for a really good joke. Yeah, I think it's a fun little role playing moment. So I'm a big fan of races that give you those abilities or classes that give you the ability to talk with wildlife. Now, the next source I'm going to be drawing inspiration from is Mordenkainen's Tomophos. They have a whole section on gnomes and halflings. And in the gnome section, there is a subcategory called Experts in Illusion. And I'm just going to read out a section of it that I thought would make a good character idea. So it says, gnomes use illusions for practically any reason, as a game, for defense, or for communication, and sometimes for no reason other than artistic considerations. A simple illusion can often express a complex idea, such as when the memories of location is triggered by illusionary sound or a babbling brook that runs through the place. A storytelling session conducted by a group of forest elves is a riot of sound and images that helps give meaning and intensity to the tales being told. It is a kind of entertainment unfathomable by most other races whose stories and performances are limited by whatever materials are on hand. So that's just a small paragraph from the whole section. If you are interested in learning more about halflings and forest gnomes, I encourage you to go read the whole thing yourself. But the storytelling aspect is really what I'm kind of going to focus on. And the main deity of Forest Gnomes is Bearvon, Wild Wanderer. And there's very little written that I could find on this character, but you can use it to kind of inform maybe the dress, because the only thing that's really mentioned in here is under the worshiper section, kind of what they wear, which is brown clothings with green caps. I would do a green cloak as well, just to have a little bit more color. What they do is they take things that are of value and they bring it out into the forest for him monthly as like an offering. Now, he does have a raccoon that's his buddy called Chiquitica, Fastpaw. And if you are going to do like a familiar or something, doing a raccoon could be really on brand if you want to do something like that. Or if you're doing like a shepherd's druid, make one of your spirits maybe a raccoon instead of the unicorn or bear or whatever. Have a little bit of fun with it. But I really like the idea of you're this traveling druid or wizard or whatever you want to do. Like I said, illusionist would work great for this. If you want to do druid, would work great for this. Or even if you want to do divination wizard, because divination wizard is the best wizard, especially for new players. The best one definitely in the player's handbook. So if you want to go wizard, do that. If you want to play a druid, shepherd druid's really good. I would advise you not to pick the summoning spells that require you to read through the monster's manual if you're a new player. There are plenty of good conjure ones that you don't require you to do that. They just give you a stat block, which are fantastic as well. In fact, Trant Monk has a whole series of videos he put out recently about that. But if you're, like myself and you're very familiar with the monster manual, yeah, feel free to use the older summons. I personally like those a lot better just for the sheer utility of them, but maybe we'll cover that in a different video. So now we have a character. We know what race they are. They're a forest gnome. We know what they're going to dress in: brown clothing with green as an accent color, right? We can look at kind of some of the effects or how the character is described. Sorry, the deity is described to inform how maybe we want to add some flavor to our spells. So it says here that, he appears in amber radiance. So maybe you could give your spells like an amber kind of color. You could also add like leaves trailing, things like that. Very, very nature kind of focused. And a lot of the ways the deity shows up is kind of around that. Also, full moons or like a day of holiness for the character. So you maybe want to include some like moon imagery in your maybe character, and like maybe like a brooch or something small. Of course, the raccoon head, golden acorn is another part of it. But, all of this is just to help you kind of inform your style, right? In your background, you could do entertainer, you could do storyteller, or if you wanted to do the divination wizard, you could include things like maybe like tarot card readings or some other form of fortune telling as part of your story performances. Maybe you could do your illusions, and you could have your illusions tell them what's going to happen in the future after doing like a tarot card reading. Or, of course, you can kind of just do your regular storytelling. I have a video I did, I think it was a month ago, maybe 2 months ago, where I told a story from the Stormlight Archive from the character Wit. If you've read those books, I think Wit's character could be a really good example of kind of how you could take this concept and use it. Because, although he kind of acts as a jester while in the courts, when he's with the characters, he can perform more of a storyteller role. And kind of those scenes where he's more of a storyteller, I think could be really good and kind of show you how the way they describe the way the music works for the storytelling would be a great example of how you could use minor illusions auditory abilities to enhance your storytelling when describing it. So I think that could be a great example. Now, when I did the video, I just said the lines of the story. And I took out the explanations of the auditory things, and I just included those as sound bites with the flute in the distance and the crackling of the fire. I didn't actually say what was going on for the book because I wasn't just trying to rip the book. I was trying to share the story because I thought it was interesting. But, if you want to go read that and see what I'm talking about, go ahead. And I'm sure there's plenty of other examples that I can't think of at the top of my head that you've experienced of a great storytelling that kind of mixes a supernatural effect with it to get a better performance. So here lies kind of some of the problems with this method is you kind of have to find something that has more information put out, right? So although that Bayervan would make a good example. It's a very niche character. The problem is there's really not too much written on him. It's gonna be very difficult for you to find a ton of information. Just searching on the fandom, right? There's barely anything. If I search for him independently, I can find other websites that have more information on him, but it's still not as fleshed out as something like Strongmouse or Kazuth, because I think there are like adventures centered around those deities. I don't think they're in 5th edition, right? Because Strongmouse is dead to 5th edition. I don't know. Elemental Evils might have Kazuth in it. I haven't read through that adventure. To my knowledge, they haven't been a big centerpiece in 5th edition, but they have definitely been explored massively in older editions. Well, this is more of a side deity. You can still get some useful information, you still can get some ideas, the full moon being a holy day, you can kinda tie that into the storytelling thing of the 4 stones, and maybe you do, like, a special performance for people during full moons or something like that. The giving a item of value, a keepsake, or some sort of magically enchanted item or magic item to your deity, you could interpret that as kind of a giving nature, right? So you could take even that, even though there's like only like on the fandom, there's like maybe like 2 or 3 paragraphs. There's not much. And then, I found some other websites that do have more, but there's still not like nearly as much as the other characters. You can still twist those little things into personality traits. You might have to work a little harder at it. It might not be as easily as defined, but you still can get there. And your character might not even follow this guy, right? You don't even have to mention him. It could just be, hey, I'm using this to inform my character decision to help me build a character quickly. And then, I'll explore from there. But, now you have from the Forest Gnome stuff, you have like, oh, I like to storytell. I like to use my illusions to help me storytell better. I How I dress, would be brown and green to kind of camouflage because we use our illusions to defend our homes, right? That's part of the Forest Gnome lore. And it matches with the deity. We have the raccoon kind of thing going. Maybe your character could, have a raccoon buddy or familiar if you want to kind of integrate that. But of course, that would just be, you could just make that a Forest Gnome thing. It doesn't have to be from the deity, but just, like I said, we started with the Forest Gnome, we found the Forest Gnome's deity, and then we used what's written about Forest Gnomes and kind of the older and their preferred deity to kind of flesh it out and still make something kind of interesting and different. And remember, you don't have to take all aspects of things, right? Like there are multiple sections, multiple paragraphs talking about Forest Gnomes, but you don't necessarily have to use all of them. Like, if you don't want them to be, like, very friendly towards animals and you don't really wanna go down, like, the druidy kind of stuff with it, you don't have to. You can, just keep the illusions, the storytelling kind of idea, that's a great idea. You can take, maybe the clothing, instead of doing brown and green because it's too naturey, maybe you could just wear, like, something very modest and simple that would still work in the forest. I do like the giving nature and the storytelling. I think those 2 go very well, and, now I think you'd have a hard time thinking of bonds, right? I mean, the natural thing would be like, "Oh, you care for nature," right? But I think that's so overdone, right? I think that's just kind of boring, and I think that that can kinda get you in trouble a lot. Which, yes, a bond is meant to do that. But if you're like arbitrarily like, oh, all nature must be protected, right? Where do you draw the line? Like that's such a gray thing. And yes, if you're playing one of those games where you want to talk about those sort of questions of like, hey, if a druid destroys a village so that it gets overrun by nature, is the druid wrong? Well, it's the druid's bond is to protect nature at all costs. The forest was being chopped down by the villagers. The villagers were killing the trees. The trees were older than the village was. So the logical conclusion for the druid was to destroy the entire town and give the land back to the forest and help the forest regrow over those areas, right? That's the naturist kind of mindset taken to a logical extreme. But at the same time, right, you're killing an entire village. The if you look at it from not the position of the force is the most important thing, but for the lives of the people are, then objectively what they did was evil. So, I mean, if you're having those kind of like philosophical or I guess morality based discussions at your table, and that's something that you are doing, then of course, yeah, go for it. I think it could be interesting, but interesting role playing moment. but I have a feeling that most of the other players aren't gonna be on your side on that one, and it can cause conflict in the table, so would generally advise to go against that unless you are guys are playing some sort of, like, Fey, campaign where all the party members are Fey, and that's kind of the jam is you guys are basically eco-terrorists, and you're just going around screwing up the civilized lands, and if you wanna run a campaign like that, that would be pretty fun. I think evil campaigns can be good, and I think an evil campaign that's themed very heavily, where you can still empathize and see yourself as the good guys works really well. Doing awful things, but for a good reason. Don't know if I've said it in a video yet, but I really enjoy it when the villains are you can empathize with them. Like, when you can empathize with the bad guys, I think that's a really good written villain because I think cartoonishly evil, mustache twirling is boring. I think it's incredibly more human and much more engaging when you can kind of see where the villains are coming from. And from their perspective, it makes sense. And you don't agree with what they're doing, but you can see how they got there. And I think that's really good. But I think we've kind of really gotten off rails from the original purpose of this video, so I'm gonna slow it down and end it. But yeah, this was a character concept of I guess, a traveling storyteller based on the Forest Gnome lore written in Mordecai's Tome of Foes, as well as that of the Player's Handbook. We took an idea, we expanded upon it, the foundation and everything was there just in the player's handbook, and then obviously we had to use additional sources to kind of get more information. We stole some information from a deity, but it's another way of approaching character design that kind of gets you some good results, something a little bit more in depth rather quickly without having to really, I don't think too much. Obviously, we had to make a few leaps due to the lack of information listed about the Forest Gnome's patron deity, but we were able to get something that I think could work at a table and would have a little bit more nuance to it than if we just, picked an arbitrary background and didn't really think about these or try this method at all. And I think it's good to show that sometimes you pick something and there isn't a ton of information about it because not everything is going to be as easy as the first two examples I gave. Obviously, Strong Mouse's, I know a ton about him, so I was able to talk a ton about that. I made a whole video just on that one deity. Kazuth I knew very little about, but was so well documented that we were able to get something rather rapidly. But this character, I I mean, I'm gonna cut this down, so it's gonna be a lot less time, but I'm at, like, a 30-minute mark right now. It took me a lot longer than it took me to make the other characters, and I don't think we have as strong of an idea as we did with the other ones. So, it doesn't always pan out as easily as, the first 2 videos made it seem, but you can still get there. You can still get there. But yeah, since this one's a lot less fleshed out, if you could think of any ideas, or maybe if you had any inspiration, maybe I didn't think of or I don't know about, chuck them in the comments below to kind of help flesh this character out. So maybe if someone comes across it and they can use the comment section to kind of fill the gaps that I didn't think of, or I didn't reread every single thing on Bay runs. There might be something in there that would be great. Whole point of this is kind of just scroll through, glance, pick some things quickly, move on. If I spend all day researching it. That's unrealistic for you all to replicate that because I doubt you guys are going to want to spend like 2 days of research to get a decent character. The whole point of this is to help you get something quickly that's a little bit more engaging that you can flesh out as you play it. But yeah, thank you for watching. Please subscribe. It helps me out a lot. I also like the video, the engagements, whatever, with comments and likes and subscriptions and all that. Apparently, make it where you get more impressions, and the impressions yield more views. So, the more people that get to see this stuff based on how you interact with it. So, however you would like to do that, it is appreciated, nevertheless. And thank you for watching.